Well, here we are again. You may all still be basking in the afterglow of a fantastic game at Anfield last night, but the world of Liverpool does not stop, does not sleep, and we are back here again at the AXA Training Centre for another pre-match press conference ahead of another massive game for Liverpool against Manchester City on Sunday. Now, Arne Slot was on top form, just like his team was, had some good news in terms of injuries, some interesting news as well as his own thoughts about Pep Guardiola and the current form of Manchester City and how you should never really take your eye off this team. But we'll go into all that in a lot more detail. Well, not quite at the lab, but somewhere that you'll recognise. And we're back. I told you it might be somewhere you'll recognise. You can probably tell from behind me that I am here in the Anfield Wrap studios. I'm about to do an Anfield Wrap show in about 45 minutes or so. So I just want to squeeze this in here just so you can get all of my top takeaways about that pre-match press conference by Arne Slot ahead of the game against Manchester City. Now, my first top takeaway is the thing that you're all the most interested in, which is injury news. And for once, it was good news from Arne Slot. We didn't hear much about Conor Bradley or about Ibrahima Konate, but what we did hear for sure is that Trent Alexander-Arnold is back and ready to start against Manchester City. And frankly, that news is probably more important than anything you hear about Bradley and Konate. And let me explain that. Essentially, Trent being fit solves both problems in one. Because what it means is that Trent is able to play at right back, which means that Bradley is covered in case he can't play. But it also means that Joe Gomez comes into contention as a potential centre-back option rather than him playing at right back, which means that if Konate can't play, Joe Gomez is there already. But also, if Arne Slot is concerned about Andy Robertson's ability to play 3 intense games in the space of 8 days, Joe Gomez can be a left back and Jarrell Quansah can be the guy who replaces Konate. If Konate needs replacing, that is. I'm still of the opinion that I think that Ibu will play against Manchester City. For Conor, to be honest, from where I was sitting in the stands, it looked like a hamstring. He looked like he pulled out. I think we've seen enough hamstring injuries to know that that's exactly what it looked like. So I wouldn't be surprised if Conor has got a little bit of a spell on the sidelines, which is such bad luck for him considering the quality performance that he put in. But I mean, at least it means he can sit there and watch Real Madrid highlights for a few weeks. Top takeaway number 2, Slot loves Pep. Thought as if I've written it on the side of a wall in chalk. But yes, Slot does love Pep. We heard before he joined Liverpool that he was a bit of a Pep Guardiola disciple, and he's clear from the way he talks about him that he is. And he is in no doubt, despite what everyone else seems to think, that his powers haven't started to wane and that he's still got all of the tricks up his sleeve that he's always had. And when he is someone who's like a Pep disciple, as I mentioned, I meant that he spent lots of time studying him while he was a Feyenoord coach, lots of time referencing him and his City team to his Feyenoord players, which I think is actually going to come in handy for him in Liverpool, because first of all, I think this is the first time he's actually gone up against Pep Guardiola, but it means that he knows more about Pep's teams than most people, so he'll be able to potentially dissect them and also be able to counteract them. Now, he was asked in the press conference if City's current form makes it harder or easier for them to play against, and he kind of refuted the fact that easy was something you could even say anything about Man City. But he did also mention the fact that in a lot of the games that they've lost or even drew against Feyenoord, they've been in good positions. They were up against Brighton. They were 3-0 up against Feyenoord. They really were in control against Spurs before Spurs got that first goal and it all came crumbling down. So basically, what he's telling you is that City are still able to look like City for parts of the game. So they are still a dangerous entity. So for all of you out there who've been worried that everyone's getting carried away, saying Liverpool are going to win this, Liverpool are going to win that, Liverpool are going to coast through all these things, well, one of those people getting carried away is not Arne Slot. He's very much got his eye on the ball, and trust me, that's good news for you, it's good news for me, it's good news for all the Liverpool players. And top takeaway number 3, riding the emotional wave is difficult, but not impossible. Speaking of impossible, the BBC Radio Merseyside journalist kind of made my life a little bit more difficult today in the press conference, because he went before me and he amalgamated my A question and my B question into one question. So I was kind of left thinking, well, what am I going to ask? But Basically what he asked was about the discipline of some Liverpool players in the early part of the game against Real Madrid. There was obviously Darwin Núñez, Ryan Gravenberch and Alexis McAllister all picked up yellow cards for things that they could probably have done without, and the idea that maybe the intense atmosphere and the raucous crowd kind of got their emotions running high, and obviously this is something we're going to see again on Sunday against Manchester City. Now, Arne Slot did kind of mitigate some of those things. I think he mentioned the fact that there was the first foul for McAllister, but the reality is both Núñez and Gravenberch in particular, their yellow cards were down to dissent and ill discipline, the kind of things that Arne Slot may not necessarily be publicly castigating them for, but you know in private he'll be having a word with them saying that cannot happen against Manchester City. The idea of losing a player because of some stupidness like that, as we've seen from Arsenal this season, is something you really do want to guard against. However, it was once again interesting the way Slot answered this question, because rather than say any of those things publicly, what he chose to do was to praise how they played after the booking. He said that they were really smart, something that frankly is not always associated with Darwin Núñez. But he's right, they were able to still put in tackles and get their duels won without necessarily going too close to the wind in terms of picking up a second yellow card. And this is something we've seen a lot from Liverpool in recent games. In the last game, it was Conor Bradley and Ibrahima Konate, both booked early, both able to still maintain their high level of performance throughout the rest of the game, despite those yellow cards. Alexis McAllister against Leverkusen, he played the whole game at the risk of knowing a yellow card meant that he would miss the Real Madrid game, and yet he was still able to play and perform well in that game. And frankly, because of what he did against Madrid, it's a good thing he did. So, as much as there are times when Liverpool's emotion will get the better of them, and frankly playing in front of Anfield, it's almost impossible for them to be ice cool all the time. But again, this is a situation where Liverpool can bend but not break. And here's hoping, touch wood, that continues against Manchester City as well, because you know it will be tested, not least because of all the greater Manchester officials who will be in the game. But I'm not going to start talking about referees. No, what I'm going to do now is tell you, I told you that my A question and my B question was gone. Well, I hear you ask, what was your C question, Mo? Well, let's find out, shall we?
One of the hallmarks of Man City's current run is that they could be conceding goals late in games. I think it's 6 goals in the last 15 minutes across the last 3 games. And that's something that Liverpool haven't done all season. So what are your team doing so well to avoid that eventuality?
Not playing Tottenham yet. Because they're a very good team as well. Great playing style. No, It always depends on the circumstances, and them conceding 3 against Feyenoord probably had a lot to do with the substitutions they made, and being extremely unlucky. So if you saw the first goal and the second goal, the goalkeeper hit the ball towards the post and then it fell to Santiago Gimenez. So during a season these things can happen to every team. That's the same with injuries, and we've seen this at Arsenal with Ødegaard being out, that didn't help them. With Rodri being out, it didn't help City. So I'm hoping we are not facing those same problems, but if it does, then we have to make sure it doesn't hurt us that much. But it's always difficult for every manager everywhere around the world if one of your star players is injured. And when it comes to goals conceded, it is it's always also the circumstances, also being 2-0 down and then maybe taking a lot of risk, and then conceding is different than being 1-0 up and trying to keep a clean sheet.
Now, I wouldn't necessarily agree with Arne's assessment that City were unlucky in the goals that they conceded against Feyenoord. Personally, I think those were down to just mistakes, really. But one thing he did highlight, which I think was important, was the influence of game state on all of these decisions to concede goals late, or not decisions to concede goals late, but the conceding of late goals. Game state matters. So if you're chasing the game, for example, if you're behind in a game, then you're going to take more risk, and that correlates to the idea of more gaps, and you're more at risk of conceding goals. That much I absolutely do agree with. It's funny though, because Liverpool have been behind in lots of recent games. You think about Brighton, you think about Arsenal, you think about Southampton, and yet they're still not being conceding goals. They scored 5 late on in those games that gained them 7 points, but they haven't conceded any goals. So even though game state is important, there are still some really good things that Liverpool are clearly doing. Maybe he just didn't want to let me know and let the world know, and that's all right. this is one of the things that I've learned to notice over the course of my time doing these press conferences. There are times when he doesn't really want to answer my question or anyone's question, but he still gives us something interesting to go on. And you know what? I'll take that. Now, before we leave, there's something else that I wanted to address, namely the fact that, what am I doing here right now? You, me, and most people assumed that this press conference would be happening on Friday morning, but here we are on Thursday afternoon. Now, it could be many reasons for this. It could be the fact that Slot wanted to give them the whole of Friday off, so he didn't want to be in the building at all on Friday, so they can have a rest and recuperation day ahead of Manchester City. Or, as the rumour mill seems to be telling you, maybe there's a big announcement coming tomorrow and they wanted to get the press out of the way before that happens. Maybe a new contract signing, particularly maybe the captain, if you believe all the rumours. Now, I don't know anything about that. I hope it's true, but I cannot confirm or deny. But put it this way, if you see Virgil van Dijk signing a new contract tomorrow, don't be too surprised. Thank you for all of your help over the course of the last few weeks and all of your support for me and my channel. Please tell your friends, please like, please comment, do all the things that you and I know matter in this world of content creation. Don't forget to check out my Substack. My match report from last night is up there. It's hot and live, so go out there and read it. And hey, we'll do all this again one time soon.
Fucking hell, you're getting really fucking good at this.